Okay, guys, so if you're online, we're recording. For those of you who are here, also we are recording. And I didn't introduce myself the last couple of times, but just so you all know, my name is Dr. Sherry Krajewski. So everybody just calls me Dr. Sherry or Sherry. And I have the pleasure of introducing you to Mr. Todd Henry, who is the coordinating specialist. I was going to say something different, but coordinating specialist at the Student Center for Research, Creativity, and Scholarship, which is our office. And we actually help manage the advanced program and the rollout of that. And today, what Mr. Todd is going to tell you about is from paper to pocket, how to pay your undergraduate research, specifically, or researcher specifically about the paperwork. No one does it better. And so, Mr. Todd, turn it over to you.
Good morning. Thank you all for attending. I do want to preface my talk in stating that the three methods that I'm going to talk about today and how to pay an undergraduate student worker aren't the only ways to pay an undergraduate student worker. With Dr. Skilton's presentation that we had earlier, she also mentioned the fact that you can also pay an undergraduate student worker through a professorship. So I do not want anyone to leave with the impression, say, this is it. This is the only ways. And there could possibly be other ways, but I'm going to touch on the three primary ways to pay an undergraduate student worker. Just a second.
So, yeah, just use the arrows.
Use the having a little technical difficulty.
A short bit of technical difficulty. There.
Okay. Okay. So the three primary ways to pay an undergraduate student worker that I'm going to touch on today are through grants, federal work study, and scholarship student workers. Again, that Ms. Sheila Holmes had talked about earlier. I'm just going to talk about, expand on that a little bit. So this presentation focuses on the methodology to pay the students. It's a general overview of the procedures to do so. So if you want to hire an undergraduate student worker from a grant, so the first thing that you want to ensure is that the grant allows you to hire an undergraduate student worker. If that provision is not included in there, you will not be able to hire that student. You have to make sure the funds are set aside for the undergraduate student worker. Grants are going to be approved through SPFAC. They manage post-awards, and they're going to make sure that you have sufficient funds to fund your student worker. A grant can be paid hourly, but my recommendation is if you, let's say, have a grant and you allow for $2,000 for an undergraduate student worker in this example. My suggestion is, and after consulting with persons at SPFAC, specifically Mr. Joe Durego, who is very helpful in helping me with this presentation, it may be better to pay them with a stipend. So we're going to talk in just a minute in the form and where do you specify this stipend. So if you pay them hourly, you would have to worry about, well, am I going to overspend the funds? Did they work too many hours? If you specify, for example, $500 a month, I want to pay 4 undergraduate students, $500 a month, March through April, whatever it is. I'm going to show you in a minute where to put that information at. The second method to hire an undergraduate student worker is going to be hiring a student through federal work study. So we suggest that you go first through your department head. Each department is allotted a set number of hours for federal work study students. So how are you going to know that? These federal work study students may already be assigned for other tasks. So if you start with your department head, you can find out what's available for you. They're paid $7.25 an hourly, and they can work up to 12 hours weekly. The most important item to address with federal work study students, and for that matter, which we'll talk about in a minute, scholarship student workers, is other than their main work responsibilities, is they need to complete their timesheets by the due date. The reason why I'm stressing that, if you're going to get sent reminders by email, they're going to get sent reminders by email. If they're not completed timely, it becomes a bit of a hassle. You have to get the department head to sign, they send you a paper form, You have to get it to the federal work-study student office. And there's always a risk that the student may not be paid. So stress to the student, complete your timesheets when you get the reminder. You as the faculty member, which it could be also a staff member, need to also approve the timesheets timely. Also, when you have a new federal work-study student, they're going to be sent forms in the beginning, including an I-9 and a W-4. They also have to return their social security card as well as a picture ID. This is to get their employment started with the university. Now, I also highly encourage any student workers to sign up for direct deposit. Having to go pick up a paper check or send someone to go pick up a paper check is not desirable. Federal work-study students can work at any time during breaks and during a summer session. Their eligibility is determined by their FAFSA application. Basically, it's their unmet need determines that they are eligible for federal work-study funds. The third method to hire a student worker is a scholarship student worker that Ms. Holmes spoke about earlier. I'm going to go a little more in depth into this option for you. Scholarship student workers are assigned by a major to a specific manager within the department. This person is then going to pair that scholarship student with the faculty or program. Again, contacting your department head, you could, if you would like to hire a scholarship student work, you can ask your department head, well, how many scholarship student workers do we have available? They are $7.25 an hour at 10 hours weekly. The scholarship office makes freshman job offers in June of each year. So if you're interested in this type of student worker, you need to inquire early. They are paid to work only fall and spring semesters. So they do not work during break. They do not work during the summer. Now, again, I've alluded earlier about completing the paperwork for this provisions for hiring student workers. With the scholarship office, they will handle the paperwork for hiring the scholarship student worker. A letter is sent both to the student and the department that they're assigned to with their initial sign-up. It's their initial sign-up paperwork. And Ms. Holmes, again, in her presentation had spoken about that. Now, this is the PAF form that Human Resources in an earlier presentation in the spring had said they hope to eventually put this form online. As of right now, this form is available on the Human Resources website under the hiring procedures and forms. And I'm going to touch on this again because this is a very important point. You always want to use the personnel action form, the latest one that's available on the Human Resources website. If you use an older form, it will probably get sent back to you saying you're using an older form. This is not correct. So always go to the Human Resources website to get the latest version. Now, when you complete this form, to try to make it as easy as possible and streamlined, which is what I like to do. You're a faculty member, you're ready to hire your undergraduate student worker. What do I do? Where do I start? This form has just got a lot of information on here. Well, let me try to make it as simple as I can. So the first thing that we want to see is the top portion of the form. Basic information, student's name, department, put undergraduate student worker. And again, this is only for, you only fill this form out for federal work study students or if you have a grant or if you have a professorship. So you're going to put the name, UL ID of the supervisor, your assigned department number. If you do not know what that number is, check with your administrative assistant. It's your main departmental budget number. Like for us, it's 2016. It's part of the FOAP. Just it's going to be the O in the FOAP. So like for us, it's 2016. For physics, it's 2740, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, the moment you have to include the UL ID of the student that you want to hire and their effective date. Like for us, we would, if you hire, like say a federal work study student, it's going to be the first day of the semester, which is Monday, obviously. You're going to put their address and phone number. So basic information at the top of the form. Where do I go from there? So the next part that you want to put down is, so if it's going to be a student worker, you're going to indicate student worker. If it's going to be federal work study, you will indicate federal work study. And this is my favorite part of the PAF, the comments and justification section. This is where you're going to include, okay, I'm Dr. So-and-so, I'm hiring a student through a grant. This is where you're going to put down, John Doe is going to work 20 hours a week. I'm going to pay him $500 a month, starting in September of 2022, ending in December of 2022. Not to exceed $5,000. And that way it will be and the student is to be paid once monthly. You put the comments and justification, put your intentions here, that they're a student worker, they're being paid X amount. Now, if it's a federal work study student, that's a different ballgame. All you're going to put down in the comments and justification section is it's a federal work study student. Now, federal work study has their own funding. You don't have to pay for them. If you send this form off, basically you're going to go to the second, if it's a federal work study student, you're basically going to go to the second side, you're going to print your name, submit it by, have your department head sign. With a federal work study student, this form is going to go directly to the student work study office. I have contact information I'm going to share with you in just a minute where to send that. Now, if you're going to use the form through a grant, if it's going to be a student worker through a grant, after you specify, again, in this section, the comments about how much they're paid, paying them through a stipend is, again, what I recommend. And also, that's not just my recommendation, it's also SPFAC's recommendation. Then after you and your department head sign, you're going to send this on to SPFAC. And again, third, if you hire a scholarship student worker, they're going to take care of this form for you. Now, again, I'm pay special attention to the comments section. This is important with any PAF. It communicates information to the payroll office so they're going to know how to pay the student. Now, going back to the PAF for grants, you're going to be assigned an account number. When you fill out the PAF from earlier, in this section, you're going to have to put down your grant number. You should know what that number is. That number is going to be sent to you by SPFAC. So if you're paying them through a grant, you have to specify the funding. You do not have to, again, do that through federal work study, and you don't have to do that through a scholarship student worker. Now, account numbers include a FOP. Again, that number is going to be communicated to you by SPFAC. Now, if you need any assistance or you get bogged down, you can always go see your department's administrative assistant. My final thoughts on this is to communicate to you that the Student Work Study Office, SPFAC, and the Scholarship Office are not employment offices. The best method is to go through your department before hiring an undergraduate student worker, especially if the student will not be paid through a grant. Paths, again, are completed by faculty members for undergraduate student workers, as well as for the federal work study students. We've already touched about what the scholarship office does with paths, that they handle that paperwork. Again, always use the latest path available at the Human Resources website. Again, I have seen pay special attention. There's some people who will send the path back to you. If you don't put last name, first name, if you put the first name first, they're going to send it back. You don't use the right form, they're going to send it back. So just pay special attention to the provisions of the form and using the latest one on the Human Resources website. And finally, as I said earlier, to make things easier on you and the student, make sure there's timesheets are completed timely. And then you won't, you'll avoid some grief that way. Now, something I did want to mention too, that, having these methods to pay students is going to expand on student undergraduate participation. You're going to benefit because you're going to get assistance with your research, and the student's going to get benefit because they're going to be a part of the research and they get paid a little bit. And this is the contact information I'd like to include. Our office can be reached at 482-1382, or you can contact me directly at Todd at louisiana.edu. Now, federal work study, including sitting the PAF off, if you decide to hire a federal work study student, after you check with your department head, you can send that to stupay@louisiana.edu. They're on the second floor of Foster Hall. SPFAC, here's their information. If you're hiring a student through a grant, SPFAC@louisiana.edu. They're located in the FG Mouton. And finally, the scholarship offices will look on the second floor of Martin Hall. They can be reached at scholars@louisiana.edu. Dr. Liz Skilton earlier said that if you have a professorship and you decide to hire a student worker that way, that PAF will go through what was Dr. McKinney's office, through the Assistant Vice President of Academic Affairs office. And you can reach that office by contacting Ms. Kathy Donham, the assistant there. So I want to thank you again all for attending and listening to me this morning. And I would like to know if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Go back to the PAF and kind of use the computer pointer to, because I have people on the line that were looking at the curriculum here, but they changed the year, use the maps.
Okay.
So they can show them your most important parts of the PAF again.
So again, to make the PAF simple, because it's such a detailed form, again, so let's say you said, well, I'm hiring such and such to be a federal work study student. Let's start with that example. Or even an undergrad student, you're going to go ahead and fill the top portion of the form. ULID, your name, department, job title, supervisor, and again, your department's main operating budget number. Then you're going to put down their address, email, home phone number. Then whenever the next part, so if it's a federal work study student, you'll check the box federal work study student and put comments justification, federal work study student. Also, you're going to indicate whether you want to hire them for the fall and spring semester, just the spring semester, however you would like to include that.
Where do they put the what semester?
Right here, in this box right here. So on a PAF, it was always communicated to me when you complete a PAF and you're completing in this section for general information, only one boxed area should be filled out. So we're talking about hiring student workers. So this is the box where you're going to go. If it's a regular student worker or federal work study student, fall and spring, fall or spring semester. And again, this is the big area that I keep repeating myself about. If you're hiring them through a grant, this is where you're going to put your notes. John Doe is being paid $500 a month for the months of September, October, November, and December, not to exceed $2,000. And this is going to be where you're going to put your grant number at. That grant number is going to be communicated to you by SPFAC. This is where that information goes right here. And then the next side of the form, basically you sign, your department head signs. If it's a federal work study student, it goes directly to stupay@louisiana.edu. If it's hired through a grant, it's going to go to SPFAC. And if you hire them through a professorship, it's going to go to Ms. Kathy Donham in Dr. McKinney's, formerly Dr. McKinney's office.
Do these PAFs have to be resubmitted each year?
Yes, so yes, absolutely. So the way the PAF works is on the previous slide, for instance, I'm going to give you an example. We're hiring a very promising young man through federal work study in our office to start in the fall. One of the suggestions that I can make, if you have a new student that you know nothing about starting with you, you could maybe just indicate, for instance, just to hire them for the fall semester right here. Maybe either that student it may not work out for whatever reason. That way, you don't have to go and send another PAF in later and say, well, I don't want to continue them for the spring. You can also, if you'd like, it's your prerogative, if you'd like to put them for fall and spring semester. This is where you indicate the semesters that they will work. Yes, ma'am.
If you hire
for fall and spring, and you intend to hire them for the entire year, not just the academic year, you would still have to do a summer PA or short.
Summer PAF, again, if they're not a scholarship student worker, federal work study can work during the summer. If your grant allows, if you have money left in your grant, you want to hire them in the summer. Yes, absolutely. You can go ahead and include that information there.
Summer, you always have to do a separate PA.
Yeah, summer, you're going to have to do a separate PAF. So if you, let's say you have a known student, they do great work and you know that they're going to be a great student to begin with, you can put down fall and spring semester and your PAF is done through the spring. And then again, stipend for the grant, federal work study, and they'll take care of the funding for that student. Yes, ma'am.
Another question. So I hate to even bring up such a horrible idea, but if you have a student that isn't working out, you do need to terminate funding, then you can get for that as well.
Right. So what happens is, so let's say our new student worker, which I have no doubt he's going to work out, but let's for some reason he's not showing up, not interested in all, not doing a good job, not doing the assigned task that you have in your research lab, for example. This student just can't continue. Well, so what you're going to have to do is, again, fill out the top portion of the PAF, and then we're going to have to do termination. And let's say they're not doing the job, dismissal. And again, go to the second page, your department head sign, send it to the necessary channels from there. Yeah, so don't think that if you hire a student worker and or they even come to you and say, Dr. So-and-so, I'm not interested in this job anymore. I don't want to continue. This isn't working out. Just send in a resignation PAF. That's simple. Resignation, sign it, send it off. My goal is to try, because I know a lot of faculty in my experience in the past, a lot of people dread the PAF, to be honest with you. A lot of people do not like filling this form out. But again, if you fill the basic top portion that I've talked about earlier up here, you get the form signed, and if nothing else, you put a good justification and comments here. If you made an error somewhere else on the form, as long as you're clearly spelling out who you're hiring, how much you're hiring them for, what period you're hiring them for, put all your notes here. If there's something wrong with the form, they'll come back and they'll reach out to you and say, Dr. So-and-so, you didn't click this box, or they may not reach you at all. They may say, look, you've already put all the notes and the comments and justification. We know exactly what you want to do. So if you're unsure of anything, the only other thing that, like I said, so if you just forget to put you don't click anything up here and you put your really good notes here, the only thing that's just besides the basic information and signatures, the only other thing you really have to indicate for a grant, you're going to have to give them a grant. And also, as another thing I want to touch on too, your department may also decide that they will use departmental funds to hire student workers. So again, that's another option besides what I've included here. You may go to your department head and say, federal work study says there's no students. I can't get a scholarship student. I don't have a grant. Would you allow me to use departmental funds to hire an undergraduate student worker? And again, all of these things are going to help you. It's going to help the student, and it'll be a good experience for everyone. Yes, ma'am.
Whether that's
Excellent question. So my recommendation is, as soon as you know that you want to hire an undergraduate student worker, please send in the PAF as soon as possible. PAFs are known to take some time to process. After you send in the PAF, if you don't hear anything after a while, I would suggest you follow up. Let's say you send it to SPFAC and you have a grant. Your grant allows you, again, I keep using the $2,000 example, to pay your student worker. Say, can you please let me know the status of the PAF to hire XXX student? Now, with federal work study, I can tell you with personal experience, they are going to communicate. You're going to know that they got the form and they're processing it, because they're going to communicate to a new student. You need to fill out your I-9, your W-4 form. We need your social security card, that type of thing. So you know that they're going to get that. You're also going to get, with federal work study, I assume they still send these little pink slips in the mail, and you get that through departmental mail. I don't know if they still send those or not. But again, follow up using the, if you ever like say, well, I just don't know, I want to make sure they got my path. Use this contact information, email them, find out, is this being processed? Because, people that came. So another good question. So again, the faculty. Oh, okay. So the question was, how do you know when the timesheet needs to be completed? How am I going to know this? So the student gets in an email saying your timesheet is due. So what I would do when I had student workers in the past, I would go and communicate to the student worker, look, this is the policy. I would like you by Thursday at noon, so they get paid every 2 weeks. And again, unless it's a grant. So if it's a federal work study student or scholarship, it's every 2 weeks. They have to complete a timesheet. They're going to get an email. So if you communicate to your student worker, please keep up with university emails. Not, it helps teach them responsibility, and they need to keep up with their emails for their classes, et cetera, obvious reasons. Please complete your timesheet by Thursday of each week, by noon. And then you're going to get an email too as the faculty member saying, oh, by the way, timesheets due for your student. And it's very easy. You go into ULink, the student, it's pretty intuitive. It's not a very difficult thing. Students go in, they put each day of the week, how many hours they put, and then you go as a faculty member, you go into ULink, and if there's a tab on their approved student worker pay, and it's not really difficult. So they'll like have 10 hours, 12 hours, whatever it is, and you just go in and do approve. There's a little checkbox save and you're done. Yes, sir.
I have a simple question. I've had students that I've hired in the past, they come to me and they say, well, I didn't get paid. And normally are students paid on the same schedule as faculty and staff, or they paid at a different schedule?
Good question. Thank you for asking. So the question is, are students, what do you do if a student comes to you and says, well, Dr. Holloman, I haven't been paid. What happened to my pay? The other part of this question was, how often is a student paid? Well, to answer both of those questions, if they're not paid, I would suggest contacting payroll at louisiana.edu, saying they'll let you know we never got a path for the student. They'll communicate to you and let you know what's wrong. Usually the problem lies with the fact that the PAF wasn't processed. So again, sending in that PAF for the student, if you're not hiring a scholarship student as early as possible, should help eliminate those problems. Also, student workers are paid, other than, again, if you're a grant, once a month would be the ideal provision with that. But federal work study students and scholarship student workers are paid bi-weekly. Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Student masters stipend, so we pay them $500 for the full semester.
Right.
One of the things that you recommended was just paying them during that last month.
Yes. Yes.
So if we fill out the PAF, we should do that at the beginning of the semester, even though they won't be paid till the very end.
Yes, because again, if you already know that you're going to be hiring 5 student ambassadors, for example, and we know who those students are. So the question that Dr. Krajewski asked was, if in our instance, we're hiring student ambassadors, and let's say, for instance, we hire 5 student ambassadors, when should we put on the PAF to pay these students? So if we know that each student ambassador is going to be paid $500 for the entire semester, instead of, I guess it depends on the director and it depends on the students. You could contact the student and say, hey, how would you like to be paid? If the students say, well, I like $100 every month, or if the student agrees and says, no, just pay me the $500. And if all the students agree, I would like to get paid my $500 in December. Then what you do, again, in the comments section of the PAF, indicate John Doe, student worker, is a student ambassador for the Student Center for Research, Creativity, and Scholarship. They are going to be paid a one-time stipend in December of 2022 of $500. Then the next part of the form, you will put down where the funding is going to come from. Our account number is what's going to be used. Did that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Anything else? All right, well, again, thank you all for attending. It was good seeing you here today, and I hope my information was helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Todd.